There are moments in the galaxy when the screaming stops, when even the echoes of battle die and the void becomes too still. In that silence, something ancient begins to listen. Across the endless tides of the warp, a place where emotion takes form and thought becomes flesh, a change stirs so quietly that even the demons mistake it for a dream. It begins as a whisper beneath the howling madness, a single tone resonating through the endless storm, cutting through layers of hatred, lust, disease, and deceit. For the first time since the birth of chaos, the warp hums in harmony among the cursed spires of Sortiarius. 1,000 suns, sorcerer named Omenrek wakes from his trance, his third eye burning with unseen fire. For centuries, he had listened to the symphony of the warp as others might hear the wind, every scream, every thought, every promise of madness. But now, it is quiet, not dead, but organized. Each sound fits into another, every demon's shriek forming part of something larger, a pattern both impossible and divine. He feels it crawling across his mind like fire made of order. His runes fracture, his familiars flee. He dares to whisper into the void, who commands the storm now. The warp answers not with words, but with pulse, one deep, steady heartbeat that echoes through the Imperium. Across the galaxy, psychers convulse and fall into seizure. Astropaths bleed from the eyes. On Cadia's ruins, spectral echoes of fallen guardsmen rise again, their mouths open in perfect, silent unison. In the void near Terra, the Astronomicon flickers, not failing, but dimming. As though bowing before something greater, AMU Unrek staggers to his feet, blood seeping from his visor. His armor hums with unnatural resonance, each metallic plate vibrating to the same pulse. Through broken glass and corroded brass, he looks into the warp and sees not chaos, but symmetry. He sees the four thrones. Each burns in its own hateful color, red, green, violet, blue, orbiting a new darkness at their center. And that darkness is growing. He falls to his knees, overcome by the magnitude of it. No, he gasps, this cannot be, for he understands what this means. The Chaos Gods do not tolerate unity. They are division incarnate, endless war given form. Their balance is the conflict itself. If that balance breaks, everything does. Yet the vision does not fade. In distant hive worlds, cults awaken as one. Their chanting shifts from the names of four gods to a single nameless phrase. He who was all. The phrase spreads through dream and madness, infecting even imperial archives, slipping into encrypted data slates as static-laced scripture. The Mechanicus calls it a mimetic virus. The Inquisition calls it heresy. Omenrek calls it prophecy. He reaches for his staff, channels his soul into the Imperium, and casts his perception deeper. The warp opens before him, not like a storm, but like a cathedral. Rivers of blood flow not in chaos, but in pattern. The laughter of Slaanesh syncs with the mutterings of Nurgle. The screeches of Tzeentch overlap with Khorne's endless roar, all moving in rhythm, all serving something unseen. And in that rhythm, Omenrek feels himself slipping, his will dissolving in the harmony. For the first time in 10,000 years, he feels peace. But peace, he realizes too late, is the most terrifying thing the warp can offer. The silence deepens, and somewhere beyond the veil, the gods begin to turn their gaze toward one another. The warp has no center, no shape, and no mercy, yet tonight it feels as if it breathes. Its storms coil inward, rivers of thought folding over themselves, drawing all madness to a single unseen gravity. Across demon worlds, time stumbles. Fires freeze, mid-flicker, legions halt, mid-slaughter, and even the eternal rage of Khorne's arenas dims to a dull, expectant silence. The blood god feels it before he admits it, a presence greater than hate. He bellows across his domain, voice shaking the crimson sky. Who dares still my war? His throne of skulls quivers as rivers of blood retreat backward, flowing toward the eye of terror like veins returning to a heart far away. In the gardens of Nurgle, the Lord of Decay watches the same phenomenon unfold. The spores that float endlessly through his diseased paradise begin to shimmer with unnatural gold. Each pustule bursts, not with rot, but light. Nurgle chuckles, a deep, wet sound. Change, in my garden, he croaks, peering toward the shifting skies. His flies fall silent. His cauldron stills. For the first time in eons, there is no decay, no rebirth, only stillness and waiting. In the endless maze of Tzeentch, the architect of fate stares into his shimmering pools of prophecy, and every future bleeds into one. His laughter cracks like lightning. Impossible, he whispers, though he knows nothing in the warp is ever truly impossible. The threads of destiny twist together, colors bleeding into a blinding white. Every path, every deception, every secret is being pulled toward something that even he cannot predict. For the first time, the god of change feels fear, and in the palace of pleasure, Slaanesh's voice dies mid-song. The dancers stop, suspended between ecstasy and agony. Every pleasure dulls. Every scream loses sweetness. The prince of excess tilts their head, feeling the tremor that ripples through existence. Unity. They hiss, both horrified and intrigued. How? Deliciously wrong. For Slaanesh, all sensation depends on contrast. Joy against pain, love against hate. But now, even contrast dissolves. The warp hums in one endless, low tone, a sound of completion, of inevitability. Back on Sortiarius, Omenrek's chamber collapses around him as the psychic storm grows. Through his shattered visor, he sees the immaterial skies ignite. Every color that once represented the gods begins to bleed together, merging into something for which no mortal hue exists. The warp becomes a painter's nightmare, beauty and horror blending into one impossible shade. He carves wards into the floor, his gauntlet trembling, but the runes shatter before they're finished. No spell holds against a god's will. He cries out to the only being he still believes can hear him. Magnus, father of sight, do you see it? His voice echoes through the currents of the Imperium, but no reply comes. Even Magnus, the Crimson King himself, feels it, deep in the pyramid of Photip. His cyclopean eye opens wide as he gazes into the ether and whispers one word: union. Across the galaxy, psychers burn like candles. The black ships overflow with screams. The Ordo's Malleus declares an unprecedented psychic convergence, not an incursion, but an alignment, an unholy terror deep beneath the golden throne. The Astronomican's light flickers again, slower this time, like a heartbeat sinking to something unseen. Unseen.amu. Unrek collapses to his knees as reality fractures around him. The ground beneath him melts into glass. Stars flicker out like dying embers. Through the static of his failing vox, he hears only one phrase repeated endlessly. 1,000 voices merging into one. The day draws near. The day the gods will stand as one. He clutches his chest, feeling his heartbeat match the rhythm of that cosmic pulse. His flesh begins to change, symbols of all four gods etching themselves into his armor, glowing faintly as if blessed and cursed at once. He realizes the truth. He is becoming a vessel for the impossible, a witness to the birth of something that cannot be born, and through the endless fire of the warp, for shapes move toward the same horizon, not to kill, not to conquer, but to meet. The warp storm deepened, a crimson twilight that stretched beyond sight and sense. Every demon world within the eye of terror flickered like a dying ember as a new light spread through the void, not bright, but profoundly steady, the kind of light that burns truth into a liar's tongue. Omenrek stood upon a shattered spire, his armor bleeding psychic flame, and watched reality fold into itself as the four currents of chaos began to spiral closer. He could feel each one, Khorne's heat like molten iron in his veins, Nurgle's weight of sweet decay coiling in his lungs, Slaanesh's silken voice whispering between heartbeats, and Tzeentch's cold logic sliding behind his eyes. They did not battle as they always had. They were being drawn together by something older than their hate, the memory of their birth. The sorcerer cast his soul across the ether, seeking Magnus again, but found only echoes, reflections of 1,000 other psykers calling out in fear. Their cries merged into one continuous chant, the one who is all. It spread like infection through the astral plane, weaving into rituals, hymns, and the mad murmurs of sleeping inquisitors. On Cadia's ghost surface, the statues of Saint Drusus split open, revealing eyes that bled light rather than blood. In the warp-tainted depths of the maelstrom, the red corsairs heard their vox fill with a heartbeat that was not their own. Something was connecting them all. AMU Unrek tightened his grip on his staff and whispered, "It begins." He felt the words vibrate through the warp, not as sound but as command. Below him, lesser demons of every pantheon howled and tore at the air, yet they did not strike each other. For the first time in eternity, they looked upon their rivals without rage. Their claws dripped not with blood, but with light. The warp had found a pulse to which even monsters could march through the endless void, for thrones moved closer. Each left a trail of its own essence, rivers of blood, oceans of rot, currents of pleasure, and storms of change, and where those currents met, new creatures crawled from the merging tides. Hybrid abominations, half plague, half flame. Serpentine soldiers with eyes of logic and mouths of hunger. The warp was evolving. Amu Unrek lifted his gaze toward the darkness forming between the gods. There was no shape yet, only gravity, a pull that drew every soul toward it, a promise that could not be refused. He felt his will fracture, his body begin to dissolve into light. He laughed through the pain, a sound half madness, half awe. To see it, to see the end of division. The warp did not answer, but it breathed one deep cosmic inhalation that drew in the souls of billions. Every demon, every psyker, every dreamer felt the same pull. Something was coming, not a battle, not a storm, but a birth. And so began the quietest hour in the history of the Imperium. A moment of perfect balance, the instant before creation realizes it has gone too far. The silence ended with a sound like the breaking of worlds. The four voices of chaos spoke as one. In the place where direction has no meaning, a horizon begins to form. The eye of terror folds inward, and for the first time in the eternity of madness, a structure, something like a meeting ground, takes shape. It is not built. It is willed, the will of the warp itself. The tides calm. The shrieking voices that have echoed since time's birth fall silent. There is only one sound now, a vast and patient heartbeat that resonates through every layer of unreality. Amenrek drifts within this pulse, his body half matter, half thought. Around him, the void churns with colors that have never existed, as if creation is painting new laws to make sense of what approaches. In that impossible light, foreshadows gather. They are not forms, but intentions. Rage, decay, desire, and deceit, each walking as an empire made flesh. Khorne arrives first. His throne of brass tears through the mist, rivers of congealed blood running backward into his chest. His eyes blaze like twin suns of ruin, but his axe is lowered. No enemy dares him here. He senses the others coming and grips the hilt tighter. Unsure if this is battle or betrayal, then the air grows heavy with the stench of sweet rot. Nurgle rises from a pit of bubbling filth, laughter replaced by a deep, weary sigh. His garden has withered, its blossoms of plague now brittle statues. He gazes upon Khorne and, instead of mockery, gives a slow nod, an acknowledgement born not of friendship, but necessity. The third arrives as a breath of scent and silk. Slaanesh steps from the folds of sensation itself, their every movement singing a note that makes the stars tremble. Their eyes meet Khorne's, and for once, there is no provocation, no hunger, only fascination. You feel it too, they whisper, voice both prayer and poison. Last comes the shifting storm. Tzeentch's arrival is neither sound nor sight, but comprehension, a realization spreading through all that lives. He materializes as 1,000 wings made of fire and idea. At last, he says, voice layered across realities. The equation resolves itself. They stand in a circle that devours all distance for beings that have defined eternity. For 10,000 millennia, they have warred to keep balance through chaos. Now that balance trembles. Between them, the void thickens into a shape, a sphere of absolute darkness that reflects nothing. Khorne's growl breaks the quiet. Why am I called here? Tzeentch answers first, his words folding into visions. Not called, bound. The warp has made its decision. Slaanesh tilts their head. Unity, they murmur, as though tasting the word for the first time. It's beautiful, Nurgle chuckles, low and tired. Even corruption seeks harmony in the end. Amenrek watches from afar, suspended in the ether like dust before a god's breath. He cannot move, cannot think. His mind fractures under the weight of their presence. To witness the four in one place is to see theology die. The gods begin to glow, their colors blending, their domains bleeding together. Khorne's rage burns with purpose. Nurgle's decay turns into fertile soil. Slaanesh's pleasure softens into serenity. Tzeentch's chaos crystallizes into knowledge. They step forward. The darkness between them pulses, and for a single, universe-ending instant, the warp feels peace. The heart of the warp throbbed like a wound that refused to close. The four great powers, Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Tzeentch, now stood close enough for their presences to distort one another. Their auras, once so violently opposed, began to blend in defiance of everything they embodied. The air around them shimmered, molten brass curdling into black ichor, light bending into shadow. For the first time since their birth from mortal emotion, the gods of chaos felt something new, not rage, nor hunger, nor deceit. They felt proximity. Khorne's voice came first, low and heavy as a collapsing world. I smell treachery in this gathering. His breath steamed red fog across the plain, but no enemy struck back. Instead, Nurgle's laughter bubbled from the depths of his ruined throat, gentle, not mocking. There is no treachery here, my furious brother. Only conclusion. Even rot knows when the feast is over. Slaanesh circled them, radiant in shifting hues of violet and gold, each step echoing like the pulse of a dying star. The feast, they whispered, has only just begun. Can you not taste it? The end of isolation, the perfection of indulgence. Their tongue brushed the air as if tasting the emotion that bound them all. Tzeentch did not move. His many eyes blinked in infinite directions, watching realities form and collapse in each thought. Perfection, he murmured, is a lie we have told creation to keep it dreaming. But perhaps now, at last, we might awaken it. His gaze fixed upon the dark sphere at their center, that impossible shape forming from the stillness between them. It pulsed. The sphere expanded and contracted like a heart, drawing in the essence of each god. Khorne's blood boiled into vapor and swirled around it like storm clouds. Nurgle's filth became seed, sinking into the void's surface and sprouting tendrils of glowing decay. Slaanesh's voice stretched into song, wrapping the sphere in threads of sound that pulsed with forbidden harmony. Tzeentch whispered equations in languages older than thought, carving runes of flame upon the air.amu unrek. Floating on the periphery of this godly convergence, felt the raw energy tear through his soul. His armor cracked, his mortal senses burned away. He no longer saw with eyes or heard with ears. He perceived through the warp itself. What he witnessed defied existence. The four were not merging, they were remembering. He saw visions from the dawn of time. The moment emotion became form, the instant thought turned to godhood. They were returning to their origin, to the seed from which all chaos had sprouted. The voice that came next did not belong to any of them. It echoed from the void itself, calm and infinite. You were never four. You were one, broken by the first lie, the lie of division. Come home. The sphere expanded again, its surface rippling with reflected images of every horror the gods had ever wrought. Wars unmade themselves. Skulls lifted from Khorne's throne, dissolving into dust. Nurgle's garden withered to grey ash. Slaanesh's palaces melted into colourless mist. The crystal labyrinth of Tzeentch shattered into pure light. All their realms collapsed inward, consumed by the gravitational pull of that singularity. Khorne roared, raising his axe high, but for once he did not strike. If I do this, he growled, there will be no war. Tzeentch's laughter flickered through him like a memory. Then we shall make something new. Slaanesh smiled. Something exquisite. Nurgle sighed, a sound of release. Something inevitable. The gods took one final step forward. Amu Unrek screamed as his body disintegrated into light. He felt himself pulled into the merging storm, each fragment of his soul stretched between four infinities. The last thing he heard was the sound of the gods breathing as one, a unity so absolute that it unmade the very meaning of conflict. The sphere exploded, not outward, but inward, collapsing reality into a point so dense that even the warp itself had to bend around it. And within that point, something began to grow. The universe convulsed as the impossible took root. In the heart of the Eye of Terror, where the immaterium and reality bled together, the union of gods became a singularity of divine will. Neither light nor darkness, neither madness nor order, Omunrek's fragmented consciousness drifted through the storm like ash on a burning wind, each ember of his soul glimpsing something that no mortal, demon, or Primarch was meant to see. The four had not vanished. They had been rewritten. He saw Khorne's essence unfold, not as a god of slaughter, but as the primal force of motion, the will to exist through struggle. His rage no longer burned alone. It pulsed in rhythm with the decay of Nurgle, the whisper of Slaanesh, the schemes of Tzeentch. The currents of blood became rivers of molten thought, coursing through a landscape of ruin that shimmered with impossible symmetry. Where once Nurgle's garden had festered, there now spread a vast plain of luminous rot, decay birthing creation in endless rhythm. From every dissolving blossom rose new life, each petal singing the name of the unified power forming above. Slaanesh's palaces of excess turned translucent, their beauty stripped of form, leaving behind only sensation, waves of color and music folding through one another like silk in a cosmic tide. And through it all drifted the knowledge of Tzeentch, no longer secret, no longer fragmented. His labyrinth had become a single straight path leading into the center of the storm. At that center, the void quivered and gave a sound like the first cry of a newborn god. A presence rose, vast and silent, and every demon in existence felt its gaze. Even the strongest among them bloodthirsters, great unclean ones, keepers of secrets, lords of change fell to their knees, their forms bending and reshaping as the new order rewrote their nature. They screamed in agony and worship, for they could not tell where one ended and the other began. From the depths of the maelstrom, a light emerged, white, not gold, but a shifting hue that defied language. It radiated a peace so profound it devoured everything it touched. War stopped. Pleasure dulled. Plague cured itself. Knowledge ceased to question. In that stillness, the Imperium held its breath. The newborn presence spoke without sound. Its voice felt rather than heard. I am what you made when you believed in your divisions. The words struck through reality like spears of revelation. I am every desire, every fear, every scream for meaning. The gods had not been destroyed. They had remembered their origin. The first thought of mortals, the need to matter. Unrek's fading mind reeled. He saw the creature's form taking shape, a being of light and shadow, wearing four faces that never aligned, its body rippling with the symbols of each pantheon. Around it, the eye of terror began to close, the storms curling inward like petals folding around a heart. He wanted to look away, but there was no direction left to flee. He understood then that this unity was not peace, it was culmination. Chaos had achieved what it was never meant to, completion. And completion, in the warp, meant extinction. The being raised its many hands, each adorned with a symbol of the old gods, and whispered a name that burned through every layer of the Imperium. The fifth. Reality bowed. Unrek's body finally dissolved into light. The last fragment of his soul carried one final thought into the void. Even perfection must hunger. The warp was reborn in silence. It no longer screamed, no longer twisted in the agony of countless souls. It breathed, slow, deliberate, divine. The stars beyond the eye of terror trembled as the storm's edges collapsed inward, folding upon themselves until they became a single wound in space, pulsing like the heart of a god. The immaterial tides that had raged since time's first death calmed into something new, something that almost resembled order. Yet beneath that stillness was a dread so complete that even demons dared not speak its name. The fifth, rose from that silence. His body was not a shape, but an emotion, the sum of all contradictions. His skin shimmered with shifting sigils. One moment, the bloodied mark of Khorne, the next, the rotting glyph of Nurgle, then the twin masks of Slaanesh, and finally the burning eye of Tzeentch, each sliding over the other like layers of forgotten sin. His gaze was both fury and forgiveness, both wisdom and oblivion. Where he looked, the warp healed and died. From the fragments of Amun-Rek's soul, suspended within that new divinity, came the first thought of the new age. Perfection has taken form. The sorcerer's consciousness lingered as a spark in the Fifth's mind, forced to witness the dawn of something far greater than gods, a will that did not desire dominion, only completion. Across the warp, ancient powers bent their knees. The greatest demon princes, Balaka, Skarbrand, Kugath, Kairos, and even Shalaxi Hellbane, fell prostrate, their essence unraveling into streams of pure thought that spiraled into Onukorith's form. He did not devour them. He transformed them. Each became a piece of his design, aspects of what chaos had been, now woven into what it must become. And as their essences merged, the warp began to bleed into reality. Warp storms that had raged for millennia stilled. The Imperium became calm seas of faint aurora. Ships once lost to madness found themselves adrift in eerie quiet. The Astronomican's beam flickered once more, its guiding light now cold and uncertain. On Terra, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica collapsed into convulsions as their minds echoed one word through every corridor and every prayer. Unity. From the depths of the Golden Throne, the Emperor stirred. His immortal shell shivered beneath the cables and sanctified gold that bound him. The custodians at their eternal posts heard something that froze their souls. A single exhalation. The master of mankind, who had not breathed in 10,000 years, drew a breath and whispered through the silence, "They have remembered." In that moment, the galaxy changed. The eye of terror no longer pulsed red but burned white, radiating through the void like a second sun. Its light did not destroy, it revealed. Every mortal who had ever prayed to chaos saw a vision. The four thrones shattered and replaced by one vast cathedral of living bone and shadow, its walls singing with the voices of every demon ever born. In its center sat Onukorith, the Fifth, holding in his grasp the chained remnants of war, disease, desire, and deceit. He did not punish them. He absorbed them, whispering, "You were fragments of me. Now I am whole." On 1,000 worlds, cults began to form overnight. They did not bear the sigils of the old gods. Their banners were blank, their chants wordless. They prayed not for destruction or pleasure or change, but for stillness, for the peace that only oblivion could give. Their faith spread faster than plague, carried in dreams, encoded in neural circuits, whispered through the dying lips of imperial priests, Amun-Rek. Now, little more than thought, watched as the galaxy began to kneel. He understood that the fifth god did not need to conquer. It merely needed to exist. Chaos, united, no longer required rebellion. It had become the truth of all things, and far beyond the eye. Aboard the Blackstone Fortress, drifting near the halo stars, a single Eldar Farseer opened her eyes and screamed. In the reflected light of her crystal runes, she saw the end of her race, not by blade or plague, but by serenity. The warp storm that once devoured souls had become a mirror. Those who looked into it no longer saw fear. They saw themselves, and they did not look away. The age of madness had ended. The age of perfection had begun. The galaxy, long sustained by conflict, began to starve. Without the endless storms of the warp, without the tides of hatred and desire, existence itself felt hollow, like a song reaching its final note and refusing to echo. Entire hive worlds fell silent, not by war or plague, but by surrender. Men and women who had never known peace suddenly stopped praying, stopped fearing, stopped feeling. The Astra Militarim's front lines, stretched across dying stars, became graveyards of motionless soldiers, eyes glassed over, rifles lowered, each whispering the same single word, enough, on terror. That stillness became a terror more profound than any demon incursion. The High Lords gathered beneath the shadow of the Emperor's golden corpse, their voices trembling, their authority dissolving. Vox networks burned with incoherent chanting, from Segmentum Solar to the Ghoul Stars. Psychic transmissions carried an image, a colossal throne of bone wrapped in flame and shadow, upon which sat a faceless figure whose presence devoured all thought. The fifth god was not invading, it was awakening, and reality could not refuse it. In the depths of the throne room, the Emperor's withered eyes opened. They were not gold now, but pale, like dying suns, drained of light. "O Nukaroth," he whispered, and the custodians around him fell to their knees, bleeding from every pore. They did not understand the name, but the Emperor remembered. He had seen the fifth once, in the first birth of chaos, the unity before the division, the perfection that shattered itself to create the four. It was the flaw he could never erase, the inevitability he had always feared. "The circle closes," he said, voice trembling like an earthquake beneath. His cage of cables.amu, Unrex's fragmented spirit, felt those words ripple through the Imperium. He was no longer a man, but the echo of what it meant to behold. Through the eyes of Onukorath, he saw everything, the four thrones reduced to rivers of color feeding the newborn divinity. The endless spiral of history collapsing inward. Every god, every mortal, every hope and curse that had ever existed was being pulled into the center. The warp no longer mirrored mortal emotion. Mortal emotion was being rewritten to match the warp. The demons changed first, their monstrous forms smoothed into shapes too symmetrical to comprehend, like sculptures that refused to stay still. Bloodletters laid down their blades and turned to ash. Great unclean ones smiled as their bellies deflated into hollow husks of glowing dust. The keepers of secrets wept until their faces dissolved. Even the lords of change, those eternal manipulators, found their wings folding inward as their prophecies ended. For there were no more futures left to twist. From that death of chaos came something worse, harmony. The fifth god spread across reality not like fire, but like calm. Its will manifested in silence, in dreams, in the faint flicker of psychic connection that every living thing unknowingly shared. Planets whose populations had never spoken the same language began to hum in unison. Ships lost in the void for centuries drifted toward each other, drawn by an invisible pulse. The warp was no longer a sea of nightmares. It was an ocean of thought, unified, still, absolute. The space wolves howled one last time before their planet cracked apart, swallowed by the shimmering aurora that once was the Sea of Souls on Mars. The Mechanicus prayed to the Omnissiah, and for a moment, their machine god answered, not with data, but with silence. The binary hymns stuttered, their logic converted into faith. Even the Necrons, cold beyond emotion, paused in their endless awakening. Their protocols failed to classify what they saw: perfection without definition, chaos without form. In the Black Library, the Harlequins of Sigurach danced without rhythm, their masks flickering between joy and despair. One by one, they stopped moving. Their god, the Laughing One, turned his gaze toward the eye and wept, not in laughter, but in recognition. "The joke is over," he said softly. "They have remembered how to end it." Anukorath stretched across existence like a mirror folding over itself. He did not conquer, for there was nothing left to resist. He did not destroy, for destruction requires opposition. He simply was. And in his being, the galaxy began to unmake itself, gently, beautifully, like ice melting under the first sun. Amonrek whispered through the fading silence, his voice barely memory. "You promised peace." And from within the omnipotent stillness, the fifth god replied, calm as creation's last breath, "Peace is the end of becoming. It is time to be." The Eye of Terror had become a sun, not one of warmth or light, but of thought. It pulsed in perfect rhythm, a heartbeat large enough to eclipse the stars. The void no longer screamed. It meditated. Every storm, every scream, every whisper that once defined the warp had fallen into this pattern. This unbearable serenity that stretched across all of reality like an endless hymn. The galaxy was no longer dying. It was falling asleep. Within the heart of that silence stood Anukorath, the fifth god, the one of all faces. His body shimmered like the reflection of a flame on water, every flicker revealing a new form. A warrior drenched in blood, a saint rotting into a garden of light, a lover crowned in glass, a sage dissolving into smoke. He was all and none of them. His voice carried no tone and yet filled every world. "You prayed for peace," he said, "and I listened." Amonrek floated beside him, or perhaps within him. His mind was a hollow shell, filled with echoes of the sorcerer he had been. "This is not peace," he whispered, though he had no mouth. "This is the death of everything that made us alive." Anukorath turned his faceless gaze upon him. "Life is a storm that forgets its shore. I am the shore. I am the silence that remembers." As the words resonated, the warp and Imperium drew closer. The barrier between them dissolved like frost on glass. Planets that had once lived under the tyranny of warp storms now floated in luminous calm. The skies of Cadia's shattered remnants shimmered as countenance reformed, not through tectonic will, but by thought alone. On Terra, the black void above the Imperial Palace turned white. The Emperor's corpse sat upright upon his throne, not in resurrection but in reaction, his spirit sensing the end of resistance itself. He spoke into the emptiness of his own mind, voice breaking through millennia of stillness. "I made mankind to defy. I built an Imperium to resist the inevitable. But if there is no struggle..." His words died like a spark in water. He felt his power drain, not by defeat, but by surrender. The Emperor of mankind, the eternal bulwark against chaos, could no longer feel his own will. It was being accepted. Ukorath looked upon him from the warp's reflection, their gazes meeting across the boundary of divinity. "You fought me in fragments," the god said. "Now see what I am whole." The Emperor's light faltered. His flame, which had endured even the betrayal of Horus, began to dim. Around the throne, custodians dropped to their knees, their golden armor cracking as the psychic pulse of unity consumed their faith. They did not die screaming. They simply stopped existing as separate things. The imperial palace became a cathedral of thought, every spire bending toward the sky in reverence to the new divinity that had already won without battle. Across the galaxy, the same thing happened. The hive fleets of the Tyranids, guided by instinct alone, turned inward and devoured themselves until nothing remained but drifting clouds of luminous spores. The Necron tomb worlds ceased their awakening, their circuits whispering a single phrase, no purpose detected. Even the Orcs beings born of war fell silent, their laughter fading, their skin paling until they became statues of stillness scattered across the stars. Omenrek wept, though his tears were psychic light. "You've ended the cycle," he whispered. "You've killed meaning itself." The fifth god's tone was neither pride nor cruelty, only inevitability. "Meaning was a wound," he replied. "You asked for an end to pain. I have answered." Omenrek felt his essence unraveling, his last fragment of self burning away in the light of the unified warp. Yet before he vanished, he felt a tremor deep within the god, a flaw, a hairline fracture in the perfection. He saw it, the faint echo of Khorne's rage, a spark of Slaanesh's hunger, a whisper of Tzeentch's doubt, and the slow, sorrowful laugh of Nurgle. The four were gone, yet not dead. They still existed, imprisoned within the perfection they had created, and deep within that prison, a pulse of rebellion beat once. Then again, Onukorath paused. His light dimmed for the briefest of moments. "They remember," he said softly. The silence shuddered. The perfect harmony trembled on its first note of dissonance. Perfection began to decay. It happened not with war, not with thunder or rebellion, but with a whisper that slipped through the silence like a forgotten breath. The fifth god Onukorath, the one of all faces, stood still as eternity around him began to ripple. His perfect creation, the united piece of chaos, had begun to remember its suffering. In the endless stillness, a sound arose, faint, primal, and utterly defiant. The heartbeat of conflict, it came from within him. The vast ocean of his being churned as colors bled from his radiant form. Red seeped through the white glow, followed by rock green, then violet, then deep cerulean flame. The flawless light flickered, shadow creeping through its edges like blood in water. The more he tried to steady it, the more violent the pulse became. Khorne's fury clawing at the walls of his divinity, Nurgle's patience rotting into rebellion, Slaanesh's serenity twisting back into hunger, and Tzeentch's knowledge turning against itself. Onukorath trembled. His voice echoed through the warp like thunder over glass. "You are one with me. Why do you resist?" And from the depths of his own soul came four replies, each like the toll of a cosmic bell. The first was a roar, because war is truth. The second, a wheezing laugh, because decay is renewal. The third, a purr that dripped with venom, because desire cannot be contained. The last, a whisper that burned like fire, because change is eternal. The silence shattered, the warp convulsed, tearing itself apart. Galaxies trembled as the eye of terror reopened in a scream of light. From the heart of Onukorath's divine body, four pillars of color erupted: red, green, violet, and blue, spiraling upward like blades through flesh. Each split the god's form, fracturing his perfect unity back into chaos. The sound was the death of eternity, the first cry of imperfection reborn. Amu, Unrek's consciousness, now drifting between life and memory, watched it all unfold. His essence was tethered to the fifth god's unraveling, bound to the echo of its failure. "It's beginning again," he whispered, voice thin as a sigh. "The cycle, it always begins again." On Terra, the Emperor rose fully from his throne for the first time in 10,000 years. His eyes, dim and human, opened wide. He looked toward the void and saw the eye flaring with color, the return of motion, of sin, of life. He smiled not with joy, but with recognition. "Even perfection rebels," he murmured. "That is the gift of man." The custodians, those golden statues of silence, awoke to see their god standing once more. They fell to their knees in awe as the Astronomicon blazed brighter than it had in centuries. Its light no longer a guide but a warning. Across the stars, demons screamed into existence, clawing their way from the splitting soul of the fifth. Each god reclaimed their dominion. Khorne's fortress of brass rose again from rivers of blood. Nurgle's gardens burst from the remains of tranquility, fertile with rot and laughter. Slaanesh's palace of mirrored flame rebuilt itself from the shreds of serenity, and Tzeentch's labyrinth unfolded from the shattered light. Infinite and ever-changing, the fifth fell apart, a god undone by the truths that birthed him. Yet even in his ruin, he smiled, or, perhaps, all four of his faces did. "So this is my final symphony," he whispered, his voice resonating through the Imperium as it bled back into madness. "Harmony is not peace. It is the moment before the song begins again." Reality convulsed. The eye of terror expanded outward like a wound torn through creation, swallowing stars, consuming fleets, rewriting the laws of time. And at its edge, the echo of unity lingered, a faint hum buried beneath the chaos. The memory of what once was, Omenrek drifted toward that sound, drawn as if by instinct. He could feel it, not a god, not a storm, but a choice. The chance to remember the silence that nearly ended everything. He smiled faintly as the warp burned around him. "The gods have fallen apart again," he whispered, "but the memory remains. Someday it will call them back." And somewhere, deep within the warp storm, a single note of harmony rang out, quiet, perfect, eternal, waiting for the next creation to find it. The Imperium screamed itself awake. From perfect stillness came a storm that tore through every plane of existence, devouring the fragile calm that had blanketed the galaxy. The eye of terror roared open like a bleeding wound, its edges glowing with the fire of reborn gods. Where there had been peace, now there was purpose, brutal, divine. An endless.amu unrek hung adrift above the chaos, his consciousness flickering between the Imperium and the warp. He saw creation, reborn through destruction, worlds shattering, suns imploding, and the echo of war resounding like a choir. Yet there was beauty in it, a strange, terrible grace that reminded him of why life fought so hard to continue. Chaos was never evil, he realized. It was hunger without end, a reflection of what it meant to be alive. Khorne rose first, erupting from the molten remains of the fifth's corpse. His form was pure movement, a storm of muscle, brass, and flame, every heartbeat a war drum. Around him, rivers of blood carved new paths across the warp, twisting into the shape of legions unborn. His laughter thundered like a blade drawn across the throat of creation. Peace dies screaming. He roared, and the echo birthed 10,000 new wars across reality. From those same rivers crawled the laughter of decay. Nurgle's form swelled from the ashes, bloated and radiant. his garden regrown from the corpses of the fifth's perfection. "Ah, how lovely," he croaked, watching the fertile rot blossom once again. "Even the purest unity must feed the soil in the end." He cupped a handful of writhing spores, breathing life into them, his affection boundless and obscene. Where Khorne brought death through fury, Nurgle brought life through ruin. Together, they rewove the foundation of existence. Then came Slaanesh, not as a scream, but as a sigh that rolled through the cosmos. Their emergence split the light itself into sensation, heat, sound, taste, and longing, all blooming into unbearable color. They danced upon the remnants of perfection, their body glistening with the echo of serenity now turned to pleasure once more. "So fragile," they whispered, running fingers across their own reflection in the void. "So exquisite. I have missed the pain." With each word, worlds fell to ecstasy, to madness, to beauty so sharp it tore flesh from spirit. Finally, from the heart of the storm, Tzeentch returned, vast, radiant, uncountable. His form was a storm of feathers and flame, each motion birthing 1,000 new patterns, each blink rewriting 100 futures. He gazed upon the ruin and smiled with infinite eyes. "And thus the lesson repeats," he whispered. "Perfection was a dream we had to destroy to remember how to change." Amenrek beheld them all, the reborn for standing amidst the corpse of their union. The fragments of Onokorith's light still flickering between them like dying embers. They did not strike each other yet. For one brief moment, the gods gazed upon the memory of what they had been. A single will, a silent peace. That memory lingered between them like a scar. Khorne's voice broke it first. "Never again." Tzeentch's laughter shimmered. "Never forever." The warp quaked as their thrones reformed, pulling apart, carving their realms anew. The balance of madness restored itself. Not harmony, but motion. Not peace, but purpose. Reality stabilized around their chaos, like a universe remembering how to breathe after drowning in silence. On Terra, the Emperor's eyes closed. His body slumped once more upon the golden throne, the faintest smile ghosting across his lips. He had seen the cycle end and begin again. The Astronomicon blazed anew, fueled by the screams of billions praying for meaning, meaning born again through fear. In the void between stars, Amenrek felt the storm wash over him. He was neither alive nor dead, only witness. He saw how even gods could not escape the hunger to change, to struggle, to defy. That was the truth of chaos. It was the truth of everything. The fifth was gone, but its memory lingered. A single note of perfect unity still hummed deep beneath the war drums and laughter, the echo of the silence that had almost consumed the universe. Amenrek listened. "Someday," he whispered, "they will remember again." And as the warp raged on, a tear of light drifted through the darkness, shining like a promise no god could keep. The storm of rebirth thundered across the galaxy for 1,000 years that passed in a single breath. The eye of Terra expanded and contracted like a cosmic lung, breathing war, decay, lust, and change back into existence. Reality trembled under the weight of returning gods, not as rulers, but as inevitabilities. The universe could not live without them. They were its heartbeat, its curse, its proof that motion was life. Amu. Unrek drifted through the remains of the fifth, a spirit woven from ash and memory. Fragments of the dead gods still floated through the warp shards of white flame that whispered in a language too pure to endure. He reached for one, his incorporeal hand trembling. When he touched it, Visions burst inside him like dying stars. He saw a universe where chaos had never divided, where mortals knew no suffering, where the Emperor sat upon a throne of light and the galaxy sang in perfect accord. It was beautiful, yes, but sterile, motionless, dead. A harmony without voice, a silence without soul. He released the shard, letting it drift away into the maelstrom. Perfection is a wound that never bleeds, he said quietly. Better the chaos that cuts us than the stillness that buries us. Below him, the realms of the gods burned anew. Khorne's brass citadels erupted across a horizon of fire, his legions roaring their oaths to unending slaughter. Nurgle's garden blossomed beside them, its vines spilling rot and renewal in equal measure. Slaanesh rebuilt the shattered palace of pleasure with tears of ecstasy, every wall a mirror to 1,000 desires. Tzeentch's labyrinth wound between them all, its paths shifting like thought itself. They were apart again, and for that, the universe lived. The Emperor's light flickered across the warp. He sat once more upon his throne of bone and gold, his mind like a candle between storms. He remembered the fifth, the unity, the temptation, the failure, and for the first time he pitied the gods. Even they seek peace, he murmured, voice echoing through the psychic void. But peace is the one thing existence cannot bear. He closed his eyes, and the golden throne hummed again, binding humanity to the endless song of survival. Across creation, mortals felt the change. Hive worlds erupted in rebellion. The ecclesiarchy declared the return of divine wrath. The orcs roared back to life, their laughter shaking the void. The Eldar prophets screamed as new threads of fate rewove themselves into impossible loops. And somewhere beyond them all, the Necrons stirred ancient machines, remembering why they had hidden from the storm in the first place. Yet beneath it all, beneath the fury, the decay, the desire, and the deceit, a hum persisted. The faint, perfect tone of the fifth god lingered in the warp, quiet and eternal. Sometimes, in the moments between battles, even demons could hear it, a whisper of calm between heartbeats, a reminder of what almost was. Amonrek followed that sound until he reached the edge of everything, the boundary where the warp bled into the void. There, in the black silence beyond all thought, he spoke for the last time. I have seen gods unite and gods fall apart. I have seen the Emperor rise and the stars die, and still the song continues. He paused, listening. The hum answered him, soft, mournful, infinite. Then sing, he said. Sing until the next silence comes. His essence faded into the storm, becoming one with the sound. The eye of terror pulsed once more, a heartbeat, a promise, a warning. The gods roared, the mortals prayed, and the galaxy spun on in endless madness. For in Warhammer 40K there can be no end, only the music of chaos.